didn't work. Oh, hi! Tim Shields, Zaya America. I hope you'll forgive the use of stills over videos this week. We're discussing Toei, and considering they still have my wizard video blocked in every country, this seemed like the easiest way to get around their draconian copyright protection. With Shotaro Ishinomori's birthday last week, I started thinking about how much his life directly influenced the material he would go on to write. Credit for today's video goes to Ranger Danger Podcast, from whom I first heard the idea a few years ago. It's since become an analytical lens that I've come to rely pretty heavily on. But first, a word from our sponsor. Come on down to AssesUSA.com. We got man ass, we got Dan ass, we got Japan ass, all
presented by Zaya.
For the next 2 weeks, if you use my code, Guy Was Right, you'll save 20%. Shotaro Ishinomori was born in 1938 during World War II. Growing up, it's safe to say from his work that he became disillusioned with the sight of his countrymen, once Nazi allies, still deeply haunted by the specter of fascism. It's on record that his father never supported him as a manga artist, instead pushing him towards a medical degree for social clout. His sister was the only one who believed in him, and eventually he left his family behind to gamble on pursuing his dreams by creating Cyborg 009. Cyborg 009, I'll admit, I never particularly engaged with prior to making this video, but I would be happy to take a look at it at some point, particularly the 2001 anime series, if there's interest in that. It does seem like it goes to some pretty interesting places. The premise is that 9 people have been kidnapped by a shadowy organization led by a figure named Black Ghost, who has turned them into cyborg weapons as part of his armada. They each have unique special abilities that make them formidable in battle, especially working in tandem. There's an elephant in the room that we need to discuss, and it's the incredibly racialized and offensive depictions of POC, and particularly the earliest entries, as is so often the case with 60s media. It's pretty inexcusable. I am visibly cringing right now at the idea of having to edit this sequence later. That these two were drawn in the way they were originally designed is literally a hate crime. However, they were given the respect and value of each of their contemporaries, as was their sister, and for the time, for anime, this was a clumsy but massive leap forward in terms of diversity of cast. For context, because it can help here, we wouldn't see such an attempt made again in a successful mainstream anime until JoJo's Bizarre Adventure in 1987 introduced the idea of Haman and stands to level the playing field by making fights competitions instead of brawls, leading to series like Naruto's Chakra System, or Full Metal Alchemist's Alchemy, or Bleach's whatever the fuck. I don't know. I didn't watch it. It doesn't matter. You get the idea. Beyblades? Now you may be saying, and I applaud your keen eye, Tim, you're the whitest motherfucker I've ever seen in my life. It is not your place to speak on POC issues, and to that I reply, that's 1000% valid. However, it didn't really seem right to just sort of skim by this shit without acknowledging it. It would be silly to say that these depictions don't run entirely counterintuitive to the message being conveyed by basically all of Shotaro Ishinomori's work, but also I'll say that it was the 60s and he clearly evolved past these biases for his later material, so I think for the purposes of this video, it's best to accept it happened and move on, although I certainly can't blame anybody who isn't able to. He proceeded to make Kamen Rider, my personal favorite series, a story of a neurodivergent man named Takeshi Hongo with a talent for physical ability and an IQ of 600 who has his body converted into a war machine, which already sounds like familiar material now. The narrative is framed around his finding his humanity through using the power the Nazi group Shocker gave him to destroy them, in the name of rescuing his fellow Japanese citizens from a history and rhetoric that many people would rather demonize than criticize. This is by no means an attempt to say that all Nazis aren't inherently scum. They get the boots medium style, hence why we have rider kicks.
Walk home, clown.
Rather, this is just to say that Ichigo and his community are the only ones who seem to proactively acknowledge the fascism haunting the country. Everyone else seems to live blissfully ignorant of it until it's staring them in the face, like the whole meme speech in Metal Gear Solid 2, except this was written in 1971 and we already know that Hideo Kojima is a Kamen Rider fan. We see this idea being played with a lot in seasons like Den-O, with the Imagine being invisible to humans until they've possessed a contract holder, the worms in Kabuto assuming a human form to deceive us, the Fangire in Kiva luring us in by seducing us, the Humagears in 01 being so fucking attractive all the time. Once again, we see him revisiting the idea of cyborgs fighting for autonomy, which I feel is representative of how alienated Ishinomori felt by the world after having been effectively rejected by his entire family. What better solution for an author than to create his own in the genuine article's absence? As an aside, I think it's incredibly gauche to play sidearm psychiatrist to a dead man that I've never met, but speaking as an autistic and having spoken to many others in the community, both about the subject and his work, I mean, his story is not uncommon to the neurodivergent community, and his material continues to reek of it to this day. I think arguably more so the more we come to understand neurodivergence, and that's worth pointing out. Okay, so, what I'm trying to say is not, was Shotaro Ishinomori autistic or not? Let's throw that away. That's going in the garbage, right? The important thing is that regardless of his involvement in the civil rights struggle, his material showed a deep understanding of it, and more importantly, it showed that Shotaro Ishinomori was willing to put in the work to criticize himself and evolve his product, so that he didn't underserve the people that he was seeking to represent with it. Which is that's so cool for the 60s and anime, just in general. Considering the cultural zeitgeist of the time, I think that that's impressive, and it's important to remember we're never going to have perfect allies. People will stumble, and people will forgive as long as people learn from those stumbles, and I think that's what we're seeing here, is a clear demonstration that every time Shotaro Ishinomori falls down, he gets back up stronger. Which, obviously, I'm a fan of. But the point is, the idea of found family carries through into Rider. Takeshi on the Run forms a small support network of his friends who actively help him in his battle against fascism. This went on to become a staple of the series, with obvious examples being the Kamen Rider Club in Fourze, Cafe Nasuta in Build, or Wajima's Antique Store in Wizard. This was demonstrated further when Takeshi Hongo's actor, Hiroshi Fujioka, the greatest man of all time, accidentally broke both of his legs filming B-roll in a motorcycle crash, and Hayato Ichimonji was introduced to take his place on the show. The pair would subsequently team up for the rest of the series on Fujioka's healthy return, something we saw continue into the next Rider season, V3, with his sidekick, RoboCop. Ishinomori was not finished, however. He gave us one final tokusatsu mainstay. Super Sentai. Or Power Rangers, if you're white. From its inception, Super Sentai was a series about people with distinctly different backgrounds and skill sets coming together to confront something larger than any of them. In the first Sentai series, Go Ranger, the genetically enhanced Black Cross Army, gee, I wonder what that represents. Yeah, guess what? It's Nazis. Surprise! The leader is called Black Cross Führer. This isn't a hot take, this is just the plot. It's foundationally a political series, as was Cyborg 009, as was Rider before it, and we'll be employing that context and analyzing them as texts. If that bothers you, then by all means you'll be pleased to hear that we have a door. As I was saying, the Black Cross Army sends operatives to destroy the bases of the Earth Guard League, or Eagle if you squint really, really hard. 5 agents are left alive and assembled by a mentor figure who gives them what are effectively exoskeletons and totally not spandex to help them combat the terrorist group, slowly learning to love and care for each other, which only strengthens their combined fighting prowess. You've seen Sailor Moon, you get it. If you haven't seen Sailor Moon, what is wrong with you? Then Jakakwa came along and made it clear that something was still missing from the formula, at least as far as the creators were concerned. They introduced flying fortresses as a means of fighting kaiju, but it's obvious from what follows that the showrunners were still not satisfied. So along came the Spidered Man with his transforming mech spaceship Leopardon, and this is when the pieces began to click into place, if you'll Leopard on the pun. Battle Fever J had a big robot, but that was all. We got Denji Man introducing a transforming mech for the leader to pilot. Sun Vulcan came the next season, bringing a 2-parter and introducing the idea of combining robots to the franchise, and for a while, it seemed like that's where it would land, whether due to the limitations of imagination or technology. However, in 1987's Mask Man, we finally saw the idea fully come to fruition, with each member of the team having their own individual mechs. It leaned into the concept fully, also being the first series to use non-Japanese martial arts styles for several protagonists, giving it a more varied feel, if only on an aesthetic front. Importantly, it emphasized the diversity of the characters as distinct people with different histories and lives. Their power set was also vastly different from the earlier archetypes that we discussed, although it was hardly the first series to experiment with the use of non-technological superpowers. The Masked Men use Aura, which is similar to the aforementioned Hamon energy, and only follows JoJo's initial release by about a month, meaning they arrived at the same idea at roughly the same time, which is an incredible example of synchronicity and overlapping trends in media evolution. This is worth mentioning because it directly ties their importance to the team to their merit as individuals. That they're all so different is what makes them so vital to the collaborative effort. They all bring something unique to the table, something that's key to all of these franchises, but particularly emphasized here. Where Cyborg 009 is all about people defining humanity to themselves, where Kamen Rider is about the individual doing self-criticism through the reflection of the environment they surround themselves with, Super Sentai is about the idea that we are all in this fight together, and that we all have something to bring to the table together. Through these 3 works, we can see Ishinomori progressing from broken to healer, and I think that's reflected in the growing divide between Kamen Rider's gray morality and Super Sentai's brimming idealism. While I think all are important conversations to have, hence them all continuing for 50 years, I personally tend to side more with Kamen Rider's approach to real-world allegory, but that doesn't really devalue what Sentai has to say about it. In Kamen Rider Ichigo, the 2015 film continuation and conclusion of Ichigo's story, we see Shocker return, but this time as Neo Shocker, a corporate entity who seeks to win the public over through mimetic marketing. They dress in business suits and work in the public eye, no longer having to fear the public's reception because they own the public through a monopoly on technology, creating a rift between the old generation and the new. Rather than hunting down the people standing up to them, Neo Shocker simply deplatforms them, silences them on the global stage, and overpowers them with marketing and economic clout. Of particular note is the fact that Neo Shocker is entirely willing to sell out the original members of Shocker, and their philosophy, in pursuing an evil so far progressed that even Shocker rejects it, with the previous leader teaming up with Ichigo to shut them down, proving that philosophy extends both ways because it turns out Nazis don't make good bedfellows. Neo Shocker is also shown to use their economic clout to bully their way into international political power by denying resources to nations who oppose their reign, and are ultimately consumed by the people like every empire once it inevitably crumbles. This is all dismissed by Ichigo in a speech he makes to a classroom to combat Neo Shocker on a rhetorical level, pitting his ideals against them in a new arena as a guest educator and emphasizing compassion and empathy as an answer to our problems relating to each other. Our inherent connection to each other as singular living miracles of circumstance that are surviving every day in a world that wants us dead. This is mostly regarded as corny by the classroom, but Ichigo is undeterred in his efforts because a few people listen to him and the message spreads to the next generation. He has broken the silence that Neo Shocker has inflicted on him, and in doing so enriched both his own life and the lives of others. He also takes a job as a construction worker for just enough money to survive, meaning as a cyborg, he's basically carrying the load for the team and letting them soak in a quick cash out, which is just like Superman shit, not that one. He then, of course, also kills the leader of Neo Shocker and leaves Ambassador Hell, the previous leader of Shocker who had just helped him, to die in a gutter because there's a breaking point to even the holiest of men, and that breaking point is the exploitation of his peers. This movie shows us that as of 2015 at the very least, this is still 1000% what these series are about. Capitalism is a zero-sum game. In order for somebody to win it, somebody else has to lose it. And people can win it multiple times by pooling their resources into a board of directors to win even more, knocking even more players out of the running and forcing out any opposition. Unemployment is at an all-time high in the USA right now because, slated against hyperinflation during a global pandemic 2 years in, minimum wage 20 years ago before a corporate war economy kicked into overdrive simply doesn't hold up. Especially apparent when the same country's Defense Department just received a massive financial boost despite the country counterintuitively pulling out of an active war effort only to get into an even bigger active war effort. We see privatized healthcare ruining more lives than ever with massive bills during a time where, again, more and more people are left without income. This is made all the more apparent during a time when hospitals are overflowing with COVID victims. There's a mass grave on an island in New York constructed specifically around isolating the corpses of those the virus claimed. Imagine extending this sort of rhetoric to the fire department. We already see it play out in microcosms in our justice system, with non-scaling fines devastating poor communities over desperate acts but providing no tangible loss to the rich for the same crimes, or with the indentured servitude of privatized prisoners being exploited by big businesses to save a quick buck. How many of those people are in that position over weed charges that are now completely decriminalized across half the country? And we haven't even gotten to Elon Musk talking about using slaves in exchange for living on Mars. I swear to God, the world's a satire right now. I don't know. What do you think, American Thouser?
I hate your stinking guts. I can smell you from 1,000 miles away, and you smell like failure. You smell like hell. And I want to thank the God of the universe that I'm not with these people. I get tears in my eyes to God that I'm thankful every day that I don't come from filth like you that want to trample on humanity. Thank God I'm not a degenerate, filthy vampire like you. I'm animated. I'm alive. My heart's big. It's got hot blood going through it fast. I like to fight, too. I like to eat.
That's not really what I meant. Another example is that we know the effects of public schooling in the US compared to private schools, both in education and socioeconomic clout. Children with esteemed pedigrees and smaller classrooms have provably higher odds of getting scholarships to more prestigious universities, which then in turn network them to more prestigious job opportunities. Nepotism and finances provide opportunity for one class and deny them to the other in the same breath. And that's why, while I prefer Kamen Rider for its nuance in deconstructing the systems that we currently live in, Super Sentai also needs to be an active part of the conversation about why those systems are so bad to begin with. This is the Megazord, the Gatai. I trust we can all agree on that, yes? For the uninitiated, it's 5 individual robots combined together with individual pilots for each segment of the robot. Congratulations, you are caught up. The world is not a level playing field, and that needs to be acknowledged, which is why we can see the red T-Rex bleed into the pink pterodactyl, which is apparent from the giant black mammoth arms. At a glance, you can tell that this is both a uniform mech and several diverse parts combined, because the Megazord, the Gatai, represents people from all walks of life uniting, becoming more than the sum of their parts, to fight against a common enemy. These foes are often representing fascism through various means of hypercapitalism and imperialism, such as with the Ganglars in Lupat or the Zangyak in Gokaiger, although there are many more examples, especially the more we begin to look into the monsters of the week. With our heroes often serving as direct socialist counterpoints by emphasizing the value of community outreach and compassion for our fellow man, through providing resources and help for those in need as a public resource, as a means of reparation for past trauma or shared injustices, or just out of the goodness of their heart. I mean, sometimes you get luckier, and it's a combination of all of these things, and That's where you get complex dudes like my boy Marv-chan. I mean, I guess, like, Car Ranger wanted money for doing their job, but, like, that's a parody season, so that it's the joke just sort of reinforces my points about the rest of the seasons. Also, like, it's written by one of the Ranma showrunners, which I don't know if you've ever watched Ranma. We should talk. Oh, my channel just got claimed for talking about anime. I guess my point in all of this is that it's important for us to be compassionate if we expect compassion in kind. There are 2,043 billionaires among 7.4 billion people in the world. We lose 3.1 million to starvation every year. How many of those lives would have been rangers if afforded the opportunity, the means, the resources? How many people were forced to become riders because some guy they never met installed a pipeline in their water and corrupted it to turn a profit, shot one of their friends in the back, culled their neighborhood with eugenics? If you've made it this far into the video, I really want to thank you. I expect to lose quite a few people early on in this one. If you'd like to stay up to date with the channel, my social media will be linked below. If you would like to contribute directly to us, my Ko-fi and Patreon will also be there. My Patreon particularly has a $1 tier that will be granting you access to Discord watch parties down the line for future projects, as well as early releases of exactly these sort of videos. Thank you again for watching. I love your hair. I can't believe I've never thought to style it that way myself. I'm Tim Shields. When it comes to tokusatsu, I'm your guy. For better or worse.